All right, it is 9:10, so I'm going to start back up, even though we don't have everybody back, but he'll be back, I'm sure, very shortly. What I did, just so if you look up on the screen here, I went out to W3 Schools online during the break and went to their CSS box model, and they have this thing in here. It says, try it yourself. You click, and notice there's demonstrating the box model. Well, take a look. Notice if I put in here, if I change padding from 25 to 125, can you see the difference? All right. On the other hand, I'm going to put it back again to 25. Run it, just so you see it's back. If I change the margin to 125, that's the difference between that and whatever's next to it. You go, well, there's nothing next to it. See the difference? All right. So I took the example that they did, and I created two divs, just so you can see them. In the first one, I've got padding of 25 and 100. The second one has no padding. You see how it's pushed right against the edge? All right, so again, I can come back in here. The margin is 100, but if I set it back to what it was at 25, you can see how it changes. All right, that's how you learn how to do this stuff, is you just use tools that are online, that are available to you, and you just play with them. That's the best way to learn. And I will tell you, you're going to have an exercise, because after this chapter, we're going to very quickly go over Chapter 5, but we're going to spend more time on Chapter 6. And that's, I think I said it to you the other day, it's one of the harder chapters in the book. All right, so the first thing they talk about in here, this is a new element for HTML5. It's called a meter element. Have you ever seen this on a website where they show, for instance, maybe what programming languages are the most popular? And they show it like this. Might be a percentage, it might be a number of users. A lot of sites have online polls. You know, what did you think of this speech by this candidate yesterday? You know, really liked it, neutral, didn't like it, really hated it. Or they'll have something like that. So you can create that by using the meter element. It's one way of doing it. There's also a progress bar. Again, back in the olden days, you may or may not remember this. You might be too young to remember it. But when you did anything basically on a Microsoft machine and it was waiting, you got the little thing that looked almost like an egg timer, and it would just keep twirling around and around and around. Well, it's sometimes nice to give a user an idea that, hey, we're working on this. We'll be there in a while. Now, if you want to do this and literally have it move, you have to write some JavaScript code. All right, and we'll get into that, but that won't be till later on in the class. But a lot of times you might want to show this if, for example, let's say that you've got some kind of a site where you want to show you've got a GoFundMe page, and you're trying to show how close you are to what you want, what you want to fund. You might do something like that. Okay. All right. Background images. Now we're talking about putting a background image on a page. All right. So notice what it says: body, background image, URL. It looks a little funky. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to come back here. This probably is going to be extremely ugly with what I'm about to show you. All right. So you've been warned. This is probably going to be extremely ugly. I'm going to take that image that we put in here and I'm going to replace it. I'm going to do this. I'm going to say body. All right, I guess I'll have to do it in CSS. That's right. So I'll put it up here in my CSS. And I've got body, background image, and then you say URL and you've got to put the name of the image. Well, what was that? It was images/car.jpg, I believe. All right. So I'm going to save this and try to run it. Okay. By default, what it does is repeat is set to true. So it's going to repeat it as many times as it can fit it on a page. So, well, that's pretty ugly. Yeah, especially considering the table's still in there. But just so you see how it works. And I should be looking at it in the book, but I'm going to try to see if I can do it myself. So we'll find out. We're going to say background, repeat, don't know if it's just X. If it's wrong, you're going to know it right away. It's wrong. All right, I'll go and take a look at what the author says. No repeat means just put it in there once. If you do an X repeat, it should show it along the top, and if you do a Y repeat, it should show it along the side. In fact, that's probably what it is. It's probably background repeat, X dash repeat, but again, that could be wrong too. That's what happens when I try doing things off the top of my head when I shouldn't. But we'll find it. All right. So they give you an example here, not a great one, but you can see it. All right, and it's the background repeat property. Oh, did I say X repeat? It's repeat X or repeat Y, so I just said it backwards. So it's repeat X now that's pretty obvious how it changed. It goes along the X-axis, so it repeats horizontally. All right, I can say also repeat Y, which tells it to repeat along the Y-axis. All right, or I can say no repeat, and I think that's what it is. And it should only show once in here now, and it does. Is that pretty obvious what's going on there? Those are another thing for the test. You should understand the difference between using all those, okay? And they show it in the book also, I guess, on the bottom of page 155. All right, followed by another hands-on practice when you get to play with this. The other thing that, and I like the way she does this, is she's starting to show you how you position images on a page. And when you position images on a page, you also have the choice, do you want your text to flow around those images? You go through all that in this chapter when you go through the exercises. And there's even more about images, okay? They talk about image maps. And my guess is, even if you think you don't know what that is, you probably do. You ever gone out to a thing like this, and I don't know if it's set up or not, but if you click on a page, so for instance, if I clicked here, that might bring me up to the home page for Missouri, that kind of, or, well, I don't know how I'm in Canada, but you get the idea, right? This is a really popular thing to use for anatomy classes where people are learning about the human body. They take every part that's in there and they set an image map up for it. All right, I'll have to look, but on my external drive here, I've got one that I created years ago, and I'll throw it out there at the end by the end of class, where I used what's the thing in South Dakota with all the presidents on it? Mount Rushmore. I did that, and I set it up so with each president, you know, you click on the president and it brings up their homepage, type of an idea. So you can set up an image map if you want to, need to, for virtually anything. All right, and they show you how to do that in here and how it's done. Now, when you do this, there's different ways that you can set up areas. You can set it up basically as a rectangle. You can set it up as an ellipsis where it's more circular. The one that's used a lot, and the one that I used in the image map that I did, was a polygon, because then you can kind of create your own shape. It's the most complex, but it also gives you the most, you know, bang for your buck, or whatever you want to call it. All right. Anybody know what that is right there? See where I've got the mouse, where it's on that R? Can you see that? That's a favicon. And a lot of people do that. I've seen people on their own websites, they put a favicon where they have their own picture. Literally, they take a picture of themselves, create it as a favicon, so when you're at their site, you can see their picture. All right, you can see that one. You can see the one here, that's for Vital Source, the W3 one, etc. And they come in here and they tell you how you can configure a favicon. You do that in here This is another example where, i.e., older versions did it a little bit differently, so you've got to save it in a certain format in a certain way. That's explained in the chapter here. Usually what you do is you just create your own little image. You save it as about 20 by 20. So it's very, very small. Why? Because that's where it's going. And that's how it's used. So I'll let you take a look at that yourselves, all right? All right. Image slicing. Back in the day before we had the really, really nice software and stuff, make sure I'm taping, the really, really nice software that we have now, but before we had that, a lot of times you try to go and you try to put an image on a page and it would look real funky. It just would not look right. So many times what people did was they took their image and they put it in one of those tables that I showed you, and they put different pieces in different parts of the table because it made it easier to lay your image out on the page. That's not that big a thing today. It really isn't. All right. Sprites, as it says, a sprite is an image file that contains multiple small backgrounds. You get to do that in here. This is the first time in this, I think it's in this chapter, that you're going to go in there and you're going to work with this bistro example that she has throughout the book. And you create sprites. And what it'll do is you'll have a little menu on there, and you might have 3 or 4 options. When you put your mouse over a certain option, the sprite, it's going to be a little picture of the bistro. It'll turn white, type of an idea. All right. Whereas otherwise the sprites are blue. I think that's what it is. All right. All right. Sources of graphics. The author gives you some free stuff here. I can't say this to you too many times. This is not a joke. Okay. If I go out here. Oops. And I decide to get rid of a bunch of this stuff. Way too much open right now. There we go. So I want to go out to CNN.com. All right, I want to read my news, get my news fix for the day. And I'm looking on here, and I don't know what's going to. Oh, wow, that's a cool picture of an elephant. So I right mouse click, and I choose Save Image As. All right, I put it in my Images folder, and I just call it Elephant. Elephant.jpg. All right, now I come over to here. And I change this. I don't want my back, well, we'll make it the background image. That's going to be pretty ugly, but that's okay. All right. Well, somehow I screwed it up. I have a question for you. What did I just do? Now, and don't say you just put an image. No, what did I just do? It's not a trick question. It's something you should understand. I just broke the law. I am not allowed to go out and grab other people's images and put them on my own site. Don't ever do that. What is considered okay today is, let's say that Ethan's created this website, he's got this really cool graphic, and I'd like to use it, so I email him, on official company station or whatever, more or less use my official email address from where I work. He emails me back and says, yeah, you can use it. I'd like attribution, so I'd like you to put a thing on there that says, with permission of, okay? Now I can use it, but I want to keep that email too. But there have been a lot of stories. I remember years ago, it wasn't that many years ago, but enough. I don't know if you remember when you first started to see images, somebody had some image on their thing where they had a car, and it would go along the screen, but it looked like flames were coming out of the car. And I thought it looked pretty cool. Within about 3 or 4 days, I saw it on about 10 sites. I can guarantee you that those people stole it from that other person. They looked exactly the same. It worked exactly the same. You can't do that. All right. So if you ever want to use somebody else's stuff, ask. All right. All right. So they got guidelines. That's the first one I just gave you. Consider size versus quality. Again, if you want a really huge one on your page and it's very detailed and you want the colors, it's going to take more time to load. There's no way of getting around that. So consider the load time. Use the appropriate resolution. You might have to cut the resolution down so that it loads faster. I already showed you about specifying the height and the width. In fact, I didn't. So what I should have done earlier when we did that car one, so back a long time ago where we had this, not even this. I'm going to get rid of that. In here where we put in the car, if you remember, we had image. and we had alt equal my car. You should also say width equal, and I don't remember what it was, 259, height equals 174. That might not be the right sizes, and I should have, so I've got, you should have all those in there. When you put in a height and width tag, what you're doing is you're telling the browser how much space it has to allocate. So if it is a very complex graphic, it'll load a little faster because it knows the exact size of box it should have. And I already showed you how to find out the height and how to find out the width. I gave you 2 or 3 ways of doing that. All right. Again, with accessibility, remember, if you have people who are sight impaired looking at your site, no, looking at your site is not meant to be a bad pun or anything, but ideally what you'd like to do is have someone who's blind or has very, very bad eyesight look at your site and tell you what they'd like to be able to find out about it, and add those title tags, whatever you have to add in there. All right, then the author starts jumping into different CSS visual effects. Background clip. All right, and it says the background clip property is supported by modern browsers. You may or may not remember this from last week. If I want to know if my browser supports that, anybody remember where I can go, what the name of the site is? caniuse.com. All right, so I can go out to caniuse.com and I can check and see what browsers do and do not support the background clip property. All right, I don't know if there's anything at all on this stuff on the test. I don't remember. I'll let you know tomorrow, basically. Background origin positions the background image on the page. Notice it allows you to play with padding, border, and the actual content itself. All right. Background size allows you to, this is kind of a big one. When you work with images on different kinds of pages, a lot of times what you want to do is you want to say in there, you want to set basically the size to 100%. If you set the size to 100%, what that does is it tells the browser, use as much of the screen as I have. Remember the other day we looked at responsive websites as I shrunk down the page size? All right. If you set the image size to 100%, it'll be responsive. So as you collapse or expand the browser size, the image will get smaller or larger. So you see that a lot with responsive websites. Multiple background images. There's a background image. There's a background image. In fact, probably that's the same image there as it is there. It might not, I guess maybe it's not. All right. Here's one of the more important terms that you'll see right here when people talk about websites, and that's called progressive enhancement. In fact, there's 2 terms. One is shown here, and the other one I don't think is even mentioned in the book. One is progressive enhancement, one is graceful degradation. Okay? With progressive enhancement, what you do is you basically assume that the person looking at your website has JavaScript turned off, let's just say they're using IE2. They're using maybe the worst browser of all time. So you build the site for them so no matter how bad their browser is, they can at least work with your website. Then you add other functionality for people who have better browsers. So you start at the lowest common denominator and build your way out. Does that make sense? You progressively enhance. With graceful degradation, you do it the other way. You assume everybody's got the best browser, they got the newest version of Chrome or Safari or whatever, and then you work your way down. All right? I don't know if that's on the test, but you probably should at least know what progressive enhancement means. All right, it's another one. You can always go out to wikipedia.org and look it up if you want a little bit better definition than what the author gives or what I just gave you. This is a big one. It may not sound like it, but boy, people love this. Rounded corners in CSS3. That is such a big thing. The great thing is, if I do this and I'm using an old browser that doesn't support CSS3, it's going to look just like this, except the corners won't be rounded. they'll be square. Does that make sense? All right. So you can still put it in. So you'll do that. This is that Lighthouse Bistro that I mentioned to you that you'll be working on, all right, in the chapter and beyond. Box shadow is kind of another one where you could do some work on it. And I don't know if they even give a good example in here. See that? I don't know if you can see where I'm going here. There is a box around this, and there's a little bit of a shadowed effect right there. You could put box shadows around anything. Not only, this is not a text shadow that we looked at the last chapter. This is a box shadow. So if you take your page and you basically draw it inside of a box like this, you can work with a shadow. If I wanted to do a text shadow, if I wanted there to be a 3D effect on Lighthouse Bistro, I could use text shadow. All right. The opacity property, okay. I don't know if you can tell when you look at that opacity is probably set to about 50%. Okay. And it shows how much transparency you have in an element. All right. And it has a value when you do that that goes between 0 and 1. 0 means it's totally transparent. 1 means it's totally opaque, so it's just opposites. So if I wanted it to be 50% transparent, I'd say transparency and I'd set it to 0.5. Make sense? All right. Again, this is another one that you maybe ask something like this. I don't remember on the test, but I'll let you know tomorrow. All right. Jumping down to RGBA color. We talked a little bit about RGB a little bit earlier on in the chapter, or in the class, I should say. But now in this, I'll find it. All right, this is the bottom of page 178 in the book. That A in there stands for alpha. And it basically works with transparency again. So if I want to set a color up and I want it to have a certain amount of opacity, I can use RGBA instead of RGB. And she gives no examples here of using RGBA. But I think you do it in the hands-on practice. Please look up on the screen here. In fact, I'm going to take this, copy it, and I'm going to put it in here just so you can see it. That's not it. All right. So the 255, 255, and 255, that's the red, the green, and the blue. All right? The 0.7 means make it 70% transparent. Does all that make sense? So RGBA is red, green, blue, alpha is the way it's referred to, but it's the amount of opacity that you're going to put in there. All right. There's another way you can do color, and that's with HSLA. The H stands for hue. The S stands for saturation. The L stands for light. The A, again, is for alpha. There's just different ways that you can work with color. All right? You can take a look at that as you get time. So there's different ways that you can set up color. You now know, whether you realize it or not, you know at least 4 ways to set color. If I want something to be green, I can just say the word green. Okay? If I want it to be green, I can use the pound sign 00FF00. Okay? I can do it with red, green, blue, RGB. So I can say 0, 255, 0. That's a third one. I can do it with RGBA. All right? If I want it totally transparent, okay, I can say RGB. I can say 255, 255, 255, 0. Or 1 if I wanted it totally opaque. All right, and there's a way of doing it with HSL. So that's 5 different ways that you can work on that. All right, gradients. You may or may not be able to tell there's a gradient on here. Can you see how the color morphs near the top here? It's almost like a whitish blue, and it morphs down to a darker blue. Everybody see that? I remember when morphing started to get big, somebody put this on the internet, and don't ask me why, but I found it funny. Now, Tiffany, you said on there you have a couple of young kids. I don't know if they're into this yet or if their kids even still watch this, but when my kids were little, all they watched was that Barney, Barney the dinosaur. And after a while, you just hate that. So somebody put on the internet they had Barney morph into Hitler, where literally it just you see him go from Barney into, and I loved it. I used to bring that up all the time, not for the kids, but I just thought it was good. So you can morph anything you want into anything else. But when you work with gradients, you're morphing colors. So if you had a website where maybe you just had a page on there that had a little bit of text, but you wanted it to look almost like a sunrise or something, you could have it morph where it was darker and it was getting lighter and it was getting lighter, type of an idea, as an example. So there's a lot of ways that you could play with gradients. Here's another example that they show in here. Notice it says, this is a really good site if you've never gone out there before, css-tricks.com, because what it is it's professional developers, all right, giving you their take on, hey, if you want to do something, you might want to do it this way, all right? Oops. And as far as what's in there, again, it's not the best site ever or whatever, but there's a lot of, for lack of better words, there's a lot of cool stuff in it. This is from the first presentation I did. It's not letting me get in here. I have to get in there. Come on. I'll have to do it before we finish. So that whole thing is on CSS gradients. And they give you examples, and they show you exactly what you're going to be building. I like that. They show you before and after pictures. All right, and that's it for the chapter. So it's 9:37. So what I'm going to do, two things for the rest of the class is yours. All right, but I'm going to do two things. First thing I'm going to do is, now how many people other than me, anybody else who doesn't have their book yet? That's good, because I only need to make one copy, so that'll go faster. All right, so I'm going to go and I'm going to grab the exercises, both the hands-on and the practice exercises for Chapter 4. I'm going to do those. All right. Then afterwards, I'm going to take a look at the test, and I'm going to start to prepare your review sheet for tomorrow. And I'll have that prepared. I'll try to get it done by the end of the period. If I do, I'll give you a copy. See, it's one thing for me to throw answers at you. It's another thing for you to do that sheet. So if you've got time between now and tomorrow, probably be in your best interest. Last thing I'll mention to you is looking at our syllabus. All right, so today we went over Chapter 4. We also reviewed the test. Tomorrow, notice it's lab the entire period. We'll do that path of light for the first hour, hour and a half max, but ideally the first hour. And Eric, since you weren't here the other day, I'm going to send you where we left off last time. I'll send you my copy, all right, so you don't have to worry about going back and doing that. All right, and if anyone else needs my copy, let me know. But if yours worked fine, cool. You should be working with that one. Now just let me know later, okay? So send me an email or whatever. That's fine. I can send it to everybody. I'll just do that. All right. So we'll do that, and then the rest of the class will be for you to work on the hands-on exercises, the ones at the end of the chapter. All right. It says due on day 10. Tomorrow's day 7, so it's not due until next week. But I'd rather you have a lot of lab time. Like I said, I don't want you to be working on this stuff next Monday night when we're off next Monday. Everybody remembers that, right? Because it's Labor Day. All right. All right. Questions on anything we went over today? All right. Because that's all that I had. Yeah, if I can get the test that you just took, all right, the one I gave you back, and your previous tests, if you've got your hard copies that I gave you, you could just give them back to me. I'd appreciate it. I'll just ask Evan. If he says, no, just give them to him, that's fine. I'll give them back to you. But I don't want to hear him gasping and saying, what did you do? I don't need that either.
You want both the first one and the second one?
Every one that I've given you. Yeah, just throw them up on top here. That'd be great. Thank you very much.
Can I just give you the rest of them tomorrow?
Yeah. Yeah, if you got any at home or whatever, just bring it back when you can. That'll be fine.